Welcome to the show, Pete. Go right ahead.
Hey, guys, I got to tell you something. You know, you guys really got me upset this morning. I mean, both of you guys. I mean, how can you take the 4 plays that Edwards had there and describe Edwards as a quarterback? I don't care who was that quarterback. Edwards, between all 4 plays, probably had 1.3 seconds to try to get the ball off. No one in the world would have been able to get away from that pass rush. No one in the world would have been able to throw for more than that minus 1 yard screen. How can you guys as announcers that think you know the game, which you really don't?
Pete! Hey, Pete! Hold on 1 second, for God's sake! Jeez! Wow. I am so tired of this crap! Are you telling me there's nobody in the world who can make a play against a pass rush? I want to puke when I hear that argument. I'm tired of this crap. Yes, the offensive line stinks, Pete. I know that. But don't tell me that we don't know football, and you're going to tell me there's nobody who will make a play against a pass rush. God, I hate that argument.
That's the Bills season in a microcosm.
You know what? That's 10 years of crap flowing out in 5 seconds. I am so tired of that. I see the line, Pete. I know it stinks. It's awful. It's terrible. It's pathetic. But you tell me that you've never seen a football player in this league make plays when there's a pass rush all around him. Beat a blitz, for God's sakes. Make a play. If they're sending all those guys, they can't be covering every receiver. Make a stinking play.
You know, Howard, I think we should be happy it was for -1 yard instead of -2. It could have been worse. Could have been incomplete. Although that would probably be better. That's the Bills season in a microcosm.
It's the Bills decade in a microcosm.
That's a microcosm of the Bills season. However's the appropriate way to say it.
Well, welcome back, everybody. I didn't know what to put in there, and then I found that clip. That was from the Bills 2009-10 season. It goes to show how far we've came since then. I didn't know what to put in there. That's Howard and Jeremy on the morning show on WGR Sports Radio 550 from probably 12 years ago, 13 years ago now. But yeah, we've come a long way. But we're not here to talk about the Bills because I talked about the Bills in the last video when I focused on the Week 3 matchup against Miami. So I didn't get to talk about the other games. And, you know, since I've been procrastinating doing that, you know, talking about all the other teams now, here we are. I'm doing it literally before kickoff starts at 1 p.m. today, since considering it is 1:35 in the morning. But it's fine. It's fine, you know. It is what it is. That's why it's called the Slackin' McCracken Sports Podcast, because yeah, sometimes we slack over here, but you know, we still put that work in and we get it done anyway. Excuse me. We got a couple of games to talk about. Just pull it up here on Pro Football Reference real quick. Okay, finally. Okay, so here we go. So first we're going to talk about the Thursday night matchup between Cleveland and Pittsburgh. Now, I watched the second half of this since I was at the gym working out, but I didn't really want to watch this game. I don't really know if anybody outside of Cleveland or Pittsburgh wanted to watch this game. I don't even know if anybody in Pittsburgh wanted to watch the game, considering just how atrocious that offense has been. But I decided to watch it since, you know, there's literally nothing else to watch on a Thursday night. And I will say, you know, Jacoby Brissett doesn't look bad. You know, I know he's like a game manager type of role. I know it's like he's like the game manager until Deshaun Watson comes back, but he really doesn't look bad. Like he's doing more than just being a game manager. Brissett was 21 of 31 attempts on 220 yards, 2 touchdowns. He did get sacked twice, but he rushed for 3 attempts on 11 yards. I mean, he got the job done for them. And when Cleveland's needed Brissett's services, he's delivered so far. And that's a good thing for them because it's keeping them in the fucking hunt. It's keeping them in the race for the division and keeping them in play for the playoffs. And we don't know just exactly what the playoff picture is going to look like yet, but Cleveland's sitting at the top of their division right now because of the fact that Brissett's not shitting the bed on them. So that's good for them. Compared to how Pittsburgh's playing, Pittsburgh's really just shitting the bed on offense. I mean, Mitchell Trubisky, he was 20 of 32 attempts for 207 yards. He got sacked once. It was a 3-yard loss. He did rush for a touchdown. Excuse me, so he did have a touchdown. I read the stat wrong. My bad. So, Mitch, I don't even want to sit here and feel like it's Mitch Trubisky that's the reason their offense is not getting going. I still don't believe that it's Mitch Trubisky. I really think it's their offensive coordinator, Matt Canada, who can't seem to get this offense going despite the fact that, you have Najee Harris, you have Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson, Pat Freiermuth, George Pickens. I mean, come on. They're calling all these wildcat plays, short passes, or they're short runs that go nowhere because the offensive line stinks. So I don't know what the philosophy is. Like I said last week, I really just don't understand what this team's doing. And a lot of Pittsburgh fans are calling for Kenny Pickett. I really think there's no point in starting Kenny Pickett this year. There isn't, because the offensive line is bad. You're going to give the kid no protection, and you're going to throw him in the fire, calling all these bad play calls. It's going to go nowhere. And then it's not going to be a good look for the rookie. It's not going to be a good first impression for him. And I really don't think it's going to help in the long term. Maybe it'll, keep the fans happy in the short term, but it's not going to help in the long term putting Kenny Pickett in such a horrible situation like this. You're better off giving him time to learn the playbook, slowly let him figure everything out, try and get this offensive philosophy shit fixed, or better yet, just try something new and try to get something going here. Figure it out so that when the kid can come in, you can plug him right in the offense, and then, there you go, right there. Everything's gonna work out. But I don't know exactly what the Steelers' plan is this year. It doesn't make any sense to me what they're trying to do on offense. Without TJ Watt, their defense is like a fraction of its former self. So I don't know where Pittsburgh's going here. I really don't know. And again, we're going into week 4. They're 1-2, but I just don't know what Pittsburgh's planning on doing here. Speaking of Pittsburgh's offense, Najee Harris had 15 attempts rushing for 56 yards and a touchdown. His longest rush of the night was for 10 yards. Jalen Warren had 4 attempts for 30 yards rushing. His longest of the night was also 10 yards. Chase Claypool had 3 receptions for 35 yards. Deontay Johnson had 8 receptions for 84 yards. Longest of the night for him was 16. Longest of the night for Claypool was 20 yards. Freiermuth had 2 receptions for 41 yards, longest of the night being 26 yards. And George Pickens had 3 receptions for 39 yards, his longest of the night being 36 yards. And he had a hell of a fucking catch at one point during the game. If you know what I'm talking about, it's when he dove out and basically damn near caught it like Odell did back in his rookie season. I mean, it was just a hell of a fucking catch that he made. It was insane. Amari Cooper had a night for Cleveland, 7 receptions for 101 yards and a touchdown, his longest of the night being 32-yard reception. Kareem Hunt rushed for 12 attempts on 47 yards for no touchdowns. He caught 3 balls for 14 yards, longest of his night being 11 yards. Nick Chubb had a night, 23 attempts on 113 yards for 1 touchdown, longest run of the night being 36 yards. He was targeted once, but no yards. David Njoku had 9 receptions for 89 yards and a touchdown, his longest reception of the night being 19 yards. Donovan Peoples-Jones, he didn't do much. 1 reception for 10 yards. Didn't really do anything on 3 targets. Just didn't get anything going there. For Cleveland, Myles Garrett did get into a car accident. He was released from the hospital on Monday, and the team announced Tuesday that the 2-time All-Pro sustained a shoulder sprain, bicep strain, minor lacerations, as well as some bumps and bruises to various body parts. It leaves his status for the Browns game week 4 against the Atlanta Falcons to be determined. This has now been confirmed that he will not be playing in this game. Garrett's going to be out for that game. I wouldn't expect them to put him right back in after being in a car accident like that. His Porsche flipped multiple times. Like the car's totaled. It's fucking. It literally got folded like a lawn chair. Like the car's fucked. So I'm not surprised that he's not playing in this game. There are other edge rushers out too. I think Jadeveon Clowney's still out for them. So they're going to be having 2 rookie pass rushers play for them week 4, it looks like. So we'll see how that goes for Cleveland. But Cleveland gets the win. They're at the top of the division right now, dealing with some injuries on the D-line. Pittsburgh, I don't know what it's going to take for them to get things going. Honestly, if I was them, it would just be a rebuild year. Just try to get the most out of what you can with your guys now and just slowly start retooling and rebuilding this team. Figure out this fucking offensive struggle. You got to get over the hump somehow. Shit, even maybe fire Matt Canada. I don't know. Just you got to fucking figure this offensive bullshit out because it's so bad. I'm not even a Steelers fan, but it's bad. Like, you've got to figure something out. Next, we have an NFC South matchup between Carolina and New Orleans. Carolina comes out of this with a win, 22-14. Both teams are now 1-2. And honestly, not much was really going for the Saints. The Saints didn't score until the fourth quarter when they scored 14 points. As for Carolina, they scored a touchdown in the first quarter. They had 2 field goals in the second quarter. And in the fourth quarter, they had a touchdown and a field goal. So Baker Mayfield completed 12 of 25 attempts for 170 yards and 1 touchdown. He was sacked 3 times, and he rushed for 1 attempt, but that didn't go anywhere. He lost a yard. Jameis Winston for New Orleans was 25 for 41 of his pass attempts for 353 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. He was sacked once for an 11-yard loss. Both quarterbacks didn't play all that great. Again, James is dealing with his back, and he's dealing with, I believe, an ankle injury. But Jameis is dealing with some injuries right now. Baker, he's stuck in that Carolina mess of an offense with Matt Rule. So, I mean, Baker can only do so much. He's stuck in Carolina now. So both quarterbacks didn't play great, but they also didn't play terrible. We know James is dealing with his back injuries along with some other lingering injuries. And Baker is stuck in a mess of a situation in Carolina. Not to mention that Christian McCaffrey is hurt again. So his status for Sunday's questionable. That doesn't help their offense. But speaking of McCaffrey, he had 25 attempts rushing for 108 yards, no touchdowns. His longest rush of the day was for 18 yards. He was targeted 4 times as well, had 2 receptions for 7 yards, longest reception being 8 yards. DJ Moore had 1 reception for 2 yards. Laviska Shenault had 2 receptions for 90 yards, 67-yard touchdown reception. And Robbie Anderson had 1 reception for 14 yards. But not much really got going for Carolina in the passing game. They really just had all those field goals. I mean, other than the Shenault touchdown pass, it was just field goals. I mean, not to mention the fumble return, too, by the defense. But it was just mostly field goals by Eddie Pinheiro for Carolina. It wasn't really much of anything of a game other than that Shenault play. I mean, nothing really crazy happened here, a fumble return. But that's to be expected in the NFC South, honestly. Moving to Chicago and Houston, this was another game that nobody probably ended up watching unless you were a Chicago or Houston fan. Chicago is now 2-1 and Houston is 0-2-1. The final score being 23-20. Chicago comes out with the win, and the Bears passing attack is awful. Just fucking atrocious, because Justin Fields was 8 of 17 for 106 yards and 2 interceptions. He was also sacked 5 times. His QBR was 27.7. That's fucking ass. I just, oh my god. I really don't know how Justin Fields is supposed to succeed in Chicago. I don't know how he is, though. I mean, look, a win's a win. I'll agree with you on that, Chicago. A win is a win. But fuck, that was ugly. And y'all know it was ugly. If Roquan Smith didn't have that fucking interception, I don't know if y'all would have won the game. I'm just saying. Because this was an ugly game. If Roquan didn't get that interception, I don't know if you guys would have won this game. Or even maybe Eddie Jackson either. I mean, those interceptions were huge for them. Oops, the mic here. Davis Mills was 20 of 32 for 245 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, and he got sacked once. His QBR was 70.4. A lot better than Justin Fields, but Houston didn't get the win. Brandon Cooks had 2 receptions for 22 yards. O.J. Howard had nothing going for him in this game. Philip Dorsett had 1 reception for 15 yards. Yes, Philip Dorsett is a Houston Texan, if you didn't know that. Pharaoh Brown had 3 receptions for 31 yards. Nico Collins had 2 receptions for 41 yards. Chris Moore had 3 receptions for 63 yards. Rex Burkhead had 4 receptions for 21 yards. He rushed 3 attempts for 9 yards. Dameon Pierce, the rookie, had 20 attempts for 80 yards and 1 touchdown, his longest run of the day being for 24 yards. If you have him in fantasy, if I were you, I wouldn't cut him just yet. I have him in fantasy. If I were you, I really wouldn't cut him just yet. Just stash him or honestly start him. I mean, the kid's definitely going to be something. He seems to be thriving in a non-existent Houston offense, so I would think that means he's a pretty good running back. already, just because of the fact that Houston is not that good of a football team. Khalil Herbert stepped in for David Montgomery, who unfortunately got hurt. And Khalil Herbert stepped in last year, and when he did, he was going off. And this time he went off again for 20 attempts for 157 yards and 2 touchdowns. His longest rush of the day being for 52 yards. He also had 2 receptions for 12 yards. Equanimous St. Brown had 1 reception for 20 yards. Cole Kmet had 2 receptions for 40 yards, his longest reception being for 24 yards. Darnell Mooney had 2 receptions for 23 yards, his longest reception being for 18 yards. Byron Pringle had 1 reception for 11 yards. Not much really was going for the Bears here on offense. That defense got them the win. That offense needs a lot of work, and it comes down to the trenches and then moving their way up. Because Justin Fields is a hell of an athlete, but if he doesn't have any protection, he will not succeed in this league. And the fact that he got sacked 5 times is inexcusable by that offensive line. Y'all got to get that together. Y'all got to get that shit together. But this wasn't really anything crazy of a game that you really would have missed out on. So, I mean, it was mostly just, it was a field goal, rushing touchdown, 4-yard pass, 1-yard rush, field goal, 1-yard rush, field goal. I mean, it was nothing really crazy you missed there. Next up, Colts playing the Chiefs, and this was an upset victory for Indy as they won 20-17. The Chiefs did not have a good day here, and they blew it. But much more I could say. They blew it. And not to mention, Patrick Mahomes got into quite the argument with offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy. I don't know exactly what it was about, but one of the main reasons Bieniemy could not get a head coaching job was because of the fact that he did not get along with his quarterback, and clearly it was starting to show there on Sunday. I'm not sure exactly what's going on there in Kansas City, but that did not look good. That looked ugly, and that's something that will certainly have to be monitored throughout the rest of the season. For Patrick Mahomes, he was 20 of 35 attempts for 262 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. QBR 78.5. He was sacked once. That's not a Patrick Mahomes day. No, Patrick Mahomes day is usually just like Josh Allen, throwing for 300 yards and more. If you're throwing for like 200 some yards is a problem. If you see that stat line before the game, you're like, what's wrong with Mahomes? Or what's wrong with Allen? Because those guys throwing for 262 yards or less, you're going to ask yourself, well, what did they do wrong? Like, what happened? Why was the offense not being efficient? But they had their chances and they blew it. That's really what it comes down to. I mean, they should have won this game and they couldn't get the job done. It's that simple. Patrick Mahomes spread the ball out. It's not like he didn't. Travis Kelce had 4 receptions for 58 yards and a touchdown. Juju Smith-Schuster had 5 receptions for 89 yards. Marquez Valdes-Scantling had 4 receptions for 48 yards. Clyde Edwards-Helaire rushed the ball for 7 attempts for 0 yards. Clyde Edwards-Helaire had 5 receptions for 39 yards, but he had 7 attempts rushing for 0 yards and a touchdown. So, I mean, hey, you got the touchdown, but no yards. And honestly, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, at least in my opinion, has been a huge disappointment coming into the NFL, because watching him at LSU with Joe Burrow, I mean, I thought he was going to be a fucking workhorse coming into the league. I mean, I know he's small. He's like that Devin Singletary size, but he was a hard runner, man. I mean, I really thought he was going to be something this league, and he hasn't really done much, honestly. He's been serviceable for Kansas City, but he hasn't been that talent like we saw in the Alabama-LSU game that year, where Joe Burrow and the Tigers won that championship. Matt Ryan had 27 completions of 37 attempts for 222 yards, 2 touchdowns, although Matt Ryan was sacked 5 times with that Colts offensive line. So the Colts offensive line did not have a good day, but despite being sacked 5 times, Matt Ryan's QBR was 105.9. So Matt Ryan had a good day. Matt Ryan had a good day throwing the ball. Jonathan Taylor had 21 attempts rushing for 71 yards, no touchdowns, 3 receptions for 20 yards. Nyheim Hines had 5 receptions for 23 yards. He had 3 attempts rushing, only 7 yards. Michael Pittman came back after his injury, had 8 receptions for 72 yards. Alec Pierce, the rookie, had 3 receptions for 61 yards. Paris Campbell had 2 receptions for 10 yards. Jelani Woods had 2 receptions for 13 yards. Mo Alley Cox had 1 reception for 9 yards. So Matt Ryan was able to spread the ball out well for them, for sure. I'm not sure exactly what happened here, Kansas City, but you fucking blew it. Matt Ryan completes a 1-yard touchdown pass to Jelani Woods. That's 7-0. Travis Kelce, 3-yard pass from Patrick Mahomes, but then the kick is failed by Matt Amendola, so it's 7-6 ball game. Later on, Colts kicker Chase McLaughlin kicks a 43-yard field goal, 10-6 ball game. Clyde Edwards-Helaire gets a 1-yard rush, 2-point pass is successful, so it's 14-10 Kansas City, so they make up for that. Matt Amendola kicks a 26-yard field goal. Chase McLaughlin kicks a 51-yard field goal after that, 17-13, and then Jelani Woods gets a 12-yard pass from Matt Ryan, followed by the extra point. But the thing is here, Matt Amendola missing that field goal, that's what could have cost them this game, because I mean that would have been a tie game if you would have made that field goal. So who knows? The Kansas City could have won in overtime. They could have got the ball and scored. Or honestly, if they would have had that field goal attempt made, they could have kept the momentum, got the ball back, and scored. Either way, Kansas City blew this game. They should have won this game. Colts have not looked good up to this point, and they got the win. So good for Indy, and shame on you, Kansas City. You know you got to do better than that. Moving on to the NFC West, Rams at Cardinals. Both teams looking to stay atop one another in the NFC West. Obviously, a competitive division. We all know that. For the Rams and Matthew Stafford, he went 18 of 25 attempts for 249 yards, no touchdowns and no interceptions. So despite not getting a touchdown, he had no interceptions, so that's okay. Cam Akers had a rushing touchdown, and Cooper Kupp had a rushing touchdown as well on 1 attempt for 20 yards. Cam Akers went 12 attempts for 61 yards rushing along with that touchdown. Darrell Henderson had 4 attempts for 17 yards. Cooper Kupp had only 4 receptions for 44 yards though. Not a big day for Cooper Kupp. Now, excuse me if I pronounce his name wrong. Ben Skowronek, the Rams receiver. I think he was a rookie last year. He was in the Super Bowl. Because I remember saying, who the hell is number 18? I'll get that last name right. He had 4 receptions for 66 yards. Tyler Higbee had 4 receptions for 61 yards. Brandon Powell had 3 receptions for 27 yards. Allen Robinson had 2 receptions for 23 yards. Kyler Murray was 37 of 58 attempts for 314 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. QBR 77.8. Kyler threw the ball 58 times. And that's what Cliff Kingsbury likes to do. He likes to run that air raid offense, and he's certainly trying to get it going this year, especially after that Rams playoff loss last year. He definitely wanted to get back at them, but Arizona didn't do enough to get it done. Arizona's been struggling early on. Normally it's not like that with Arizona. Normally with Arizona, they're hot in the beginning and then they get cold. So maybe them not having a good start, maybe they'll have a better start towards the end of the year. Maybe they'll start to get hot at the end of the year when it's more necessary getting into the playoffs. So maybe this won't be a bad thing for Arizona down the line. But as of right now, it's not looking good in Arizona. And Cliff Kingsbury, I would think, is on the hot seat. Because if he can't get it going this year, I don't know, man. I mean, you got the quarterback, you got weapons, you got James Conner in the backfield. I mean, you have a good defense. There's no excuse. There's no excuse. I just don't understand. There's really no excuse at this point. James Conner had 13 attempts rushing for 39 yards. He had 3 receptions for 18 yards passing. Marquise Hollywood Brown had 14 receptions for 140 yards. Greg Dortch had 9 receptions for 80 yards. Zach Ertz had 6 receptions for 45 yards. Andy Isabella had 1 reception for 11 yards. AJ Green had no receptions for no yards. And Aaron Donald just for kicks. 6 combined tackles, 1 QB hit. Just pointing it out there. Early on, Rams get a 22-yard field goal by Matt Gay, and then later on, they get the 20-yard Cooper Kupp rush, followed by the kick, 10-0. Rams then get a 40-yard field goal by Matt Gay, 13-0. Cardinals' Matt Prater kicks a 23-yard field goal, then a 43-yard field goal, and then a 49-yard field goal after that, so it's 13-9 Rams. Akers runs in for the 14-yard touchdown. Matt Gay kicks the extra points, 20-9. And then Matt Prater kicks a 31-yard field goal late in the fourth quarter, 2012, but it's the ball game. I mean, I'm not sure exactly what's going on with that offense. And they're sloppy. They just look sloppy right now. I don't know exactly what's going on with them. They had that clutch overtime against the Raiders, and I don't know what happened. I really just don't know. They're like so hot and cold, and even during the game, it's hot and cold, and like there's like no consistency whatsoever right now with the Arizona Cardinals. So I'm not sure exactly what's going on, but maybe them not being good in the beginning of the season like they've always been could be a good thing for them down the line. Maybe this cold streak will end. Maybe they'll start getting hot in the middle of the year or towards the end of the year when they need to get into the playoffs. Maybe it'll help them, but if they keep losing games, it's not going to matter either way, obviously, when it comes time for the playoff hunt. Okay, Denver at San Francisco. And if you stayed up watching this game on Sunday Night Football, I'm sorry. Like, if you stayed up watching this game, I'm sorry. This game was a shit show, a barn burner. Nathaniel Hackett continues to prove why he shouldn't be a head coach. The dude sucks. He literally hired a coach this past week before the game to help with planning game plans, like being a game plan coordinator, because there was no experience whatsoever on this coaching staff to figure out how to fucking coordinate a fucking game plan. Let me see if I can find the coach's name real quick that they hired. So the coach they hired is Jerry Roseberg, and he's going to assist with game management issues. So game plan coordinator, game management, same fucking difference really, that have plagued Denver early in the season. According to New York Post, the 66-year-old Roseberg has been out of football after retiring prior to the 2019 season. He had spent 11 years as an assistant head coach and special teams coordinator for the Ravens following stints with the Browns and Falcons. In just 2 games as an NFL head coach, Hackett has already made some questionable decisions, opting for a 64-yard field goal in Week 1, loss to the Seahawks, and even admitted has to do a better job making decisions quicker. No shit, dude. But considering that you've been an offensive coordinator for so long now, on and off with other teams, including the Bills, Jaguars, Packers, etc., like, you should know when to make the decision. Like, what was the interviewing process for Denver here? What do they think that, yeah, this is the guy? I don't get it. Like, this is the Aaron Rodgers whisperer? Like, no, it's the fact that he was just the offensive coordinator and happened to have Aaron Rodgers as his quarterback. Same thing like with Adam Gase. Adam Gase had Peyton Manning in 2013 as his quarterback and became a head coaching commodity. And what happened? The dude fucking ruined the Dolphins and the Jets. So, safe to say, it's not always the offensive coordinator. Sometimes it's just the fact that the offensive coordinator gets bailed out by having a good quarterback, like Rodgers, Manning, etc. It's so aggravating. But literally, once again, it took the Broncos until the fourth quarter to get a touchdown. It was a 1-yard rushing touchdown by Melvin Gordon. And they went for a 2-point conversion, I believe. Hang on. But it was a 1-yard rushing touchdown by Melvin Gordon. Brandon Ayuk had a 3-yard touchdown pass from Jimmy Garoppolo. Brandon McManus later in the second quarter had a 55-yard field goal. And then in the third quarter, Jimmy Garoppolo pulls a Dan Orlovsky, runs so far back into the end zone that they get a safety, so it's 7-5. Then Robbie Gould gets a 51-yard field goal, it's 10-5, and then the 1-yard rushing touchdown by Melvin Gordon. It's 11-10 ball game. That's pretty much it. Nothing could get going for either offense. There's a defensive matchup pretty much all the way through. Jimmy Garoppolo was 18 out of 29 attempts for 211 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. He was sacked 4 times. Russell Wilson was 20 of 33 attempts for 184 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. He was also sacked 4 times. So this was pretty much a defensive matchup, both sides of the ball. Nothing could get going. Barn burner of a game on primetime football. I feel sorry for anybody who stayed up watching this, including Broncos and Niners fans, because what the fuck was that? What the fuck was that? That was just terrible. Fucking terrible. Jeff Wilson, who is currently the starting running back in San Francisco for the injured Elijah Mitchell, had 12 attempts for 75 yards. He also had 3 receptions for 31 yards. Deebo Samuel had 5 attempts rushing for 6 yards. He's still doing that receiving back type role in San Francisco. He also had 5 receptions for 73 yards. Brandon Ayuk had 3 receptions for 39 yards. George Kittle had 4 receptions for 28 yards. Kyle Juszczyk had 1 reception for 24 yards. Ray McCloud, former Bill, 1 reception for 11 yards. And Juwan Jennings had 1 reception for 5 yards. Broncos' second-year running back, Javonte Williams, had 15 attempts for 58 yards rushing. He also had 3 receptions for 2 yards. Melvin Gordon had 12 attempts rushing for 26 yards, 1 touchdown. He also had 5 receptions for 29 yards. Courtland Sutton had 8 receptions for 97 yards. Not a bad day at all for Courtland Sutton. just didn't get that touchdown he probably wanted. Kendall Hinton had 1 reception for 27 yards. Jerry Jeudy had 2 receptions for 17 yards, and that's, I mean, it was a barn burner. It was a barn burner. I mean, not much could get going for either offense. Both quarterbacks got sacked 4 times. I mean, just nothing really got going for either offense here. I'm not sure either why San Francisco is playing such poor football, because it's not like they lost anybody. They brought back all their guys this year. I mean, yeah, they lost Elijah Mitchell to injury, but just because you lose your one starting running back doesn't mean your offense should play this poor. So could just be something didn't click right that week. Because the NFL is a week-to-week league. I mean, they're professionals. It's things change on a weekly basis. Good teams could also have bad games. It happens. But, I mean, oh my God, this was a barn burner. This was a fucking barn burner. We already talked about Buffalo and Miami in the last video. I'll leave that in the comment section if you didn't see it already. So Detroit heads to Minnesota in a NFC North matchup. Now, Detroit almost won this game. Detroit did almost win this game until the Vikings scored 14 in the fourth quarter. And the thing is with the Detroit Lions, they're a good team on the rise. They're a hardworking team, and their pieces are starting to connect. The guys they drafted are starting to work in this system. Jeff Okudah's finally coming along. Penei Sewell's a solid right tackle. DeAndre Swift's coming into his own form now. The problem with the Lions is that they're not able to finish games. And what I mean by that is, if you want to win the game, you got to finish the game. And if you can't do that, you're not going to win it. And in this game, they didn't do that. And if they can't find a way to finish these games, then Detroit's going to be in the same spot they've been in the last 2 years. And that's got to be frustrating if you're Dan Campbell. You got to finish these games, and he knows that. And I'm sure he'll figure it out. But Detroit needs to finish these games. As for Minnesota, you know, they got those 14 points in the fourth quarter, and they were able to get out of there with the victory. So that's good for them. Especially, you know, working in this system with Kevin O'Connell, when they are able to rush, they're able to throw the ball. Minnesota's getting better. Justin Jefferson is kind of stalled out a little bit as of late, but I think that's just maybe he's been double covered or whatever. But the Vikings aren't as nearly as bad as they were with Mike Zimmer. They've definitely improved so far with Kevin O'Connell. And that's only going to continue to get better, I think, because the players didn't like playing for Mike Zimmer. He was doing a running style-based team. Now with Kevin O'Connell, it seems like the players are more themselves. They're able to throw the ball. And I definitely think that's going to help Minnesota out in the long run. So I definitely, like I said before, these two teams are on the rise. Green Bay has been up and down with inconsistency. But I'm sure as long as they have Aaron Rodgers, they'll still always be in the hunt. They'll always be a playoff contender for sure. But with these other teams on the rise, I mean, Green Bay's certainly not just going to walk through the division anymore like they've been for a long time now. And Chicago, they've been not playing good football, so I'm not sure what the Bears have in order there. But as for the Detroit Lions, Jared Goff was 25 of 41 attempts for 277 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, QPR of 79. He also rushed the ball twice for 8 yards. Jamal Williams had 20 attempts on 87 yards for 2 touchdowns. DeAndre Swift had 7 attempts for 31 yards before getting injured. He did not return. He had 3 receptions for 15 yards. Jamal Williams had 2 receptions for 20 yards. Josh Reynolds had 6 receptions for 96 yards. And he's got that chemistry, considering that he played with Jared Goff in LA. They both have that chemistry together. So that's definitely going to help the Lions offense out a bit. And it'll also help you if you didn't grab him already in fantasy, you should, because this guy will get you points. Amara St. Brown had 6 receptions for 73 yards. DJ Chark had 3 receptions for 46 yards. TJ Hawkinson had 3 receptions for 18 yards. And Amara St. Brown had a hell of a catch that was almost a touchdown, leaping over Patrick Peterson. That was a good play by St. Brown. He's certainly coming into his own, and he's still week by week making teams pay for not drafting him, that's for sure. Kirk Cousins was 24 of 41 attempts for 260 yards, 2 touchdowns. He was sacked once, no interceptions, 93.5 quarterback rating. Dalvin Cook had 17 attempts rushing for 96 yards and a touchdown. Alexander Mattison, the backup running back, had 7 attempts on 28 yards for 1 touchdown. Alexander Mattison also had a reception for 16 yards. KJ Osborne, 5 receptions, 73 yards, 1 touchdown. Adam Thielen, 6 receptions, 61 yards, 1 touchdown. Irv Smith Jr., 2 receptions, 32 yards. And Justin Jefferson, like I said, he hasn't really done anything the last 2 weeks. 3 receptions for 14 yards. Jalen Reagor, who was acquired by Philadelphia, he hasn't done much since joining the Minnesota Vikings either, but I'm sure he's still learning the playbook, although he's really not that good, but that's just my opinion. But this one definitely was a close one until the fourth quarter. I mean, both teams were locked in. Detroit got 7 early on. Minnesota had 14 in the second quarter. Detroit had another 7. It was tied 14. Detroit had 10 in the third quarter, and then Minnesota had the 14 points in the fourth quarter, and they got the win. Jamal Williams started out with a 2-yard rushing touchdown. Then in the second quarter, TJ Hawkinson had a 5-yard touchdown pass from Jared Goff. Adam Thielen then had a 1-yard touchdown pass from Kirk Cousins. Dalvin Cook had a 4-yard rushing touchdown. Austin Seabird had a 40-yard field goal for Detroit. Jamal Williams had a 13-yard rushing touchdown. Alexander Mattison had a 6-yard rushing touchdown. And KJ Osborne had a 28-yard pass from Kirk Cousins for a touchdown in the fourth quarter with 45 seconds remaining. So Minnesota gets the win. Detroit, it's still early, but they're definitely making a strong case for this rebuild with Dan Campbell. They're certainly making a strong case, like, hey, we're not going to be bottom feeders anymore. We're not going to be in the basement anymore. We're not going to be dwelling down there. So Detroit's definitely starting to come into their own and starting to make a name for themselves, despite the fact that they are 1-2 as of week 3. And as I'm making this recording, it is now Sunday. Obviously, week 4 happened. We're just talking about week 3 catching up, and then we'll talk about week 4 and the Bills and Ravens game that happened. Speaking of the Ravens, though, in the week 3 matchup, Baltimore and New England. Baltimore gets the win 37-26 against New England in New England. So the thing is with the Ravens, Lamar Jackson, like I said, hell of an athlete. He's able to run the ball and pass the ball when needed. Although I will continue to say, in a pure passing situation, when Lamar's running ability is taken away from him, he's not as much of a threat as he normally is, obviously. And not to mention the Ravens' defense, on average, was letting up 350 yards a game up until the Bills game. I'm not sure why that is, considering they have Marlon Humphrey, Marcus Peters, Marcus Williams. They drafted Kyle Hamilton. They have Chuck Clark. I don't know what's going on there. I don't know exactly why they can't figure out defensively. Personally, I think it was because they fired their defensive coordinator last year and used him as a scapegoat when he wasn't a bad defensive coordinator, who's now with the Giants. When they fired Wink Martindale, used him as a scapegoat, that definitely was, I think, a huge loss for that Baltimore Ravens defense, because he runs a tight ship there and he certainly can get a mean defense formed. And I think them using him as a scapegoat last year did not help their cause, considering there was all those injuries. Like, that wasn't his fault. But firing him, I think, so far is not helping them whatsoever. So Lamar Jackson had 18 of 29 attempts for 218 yards, 4 touchdowns and interception. He was sacked 4 times, QBR rating of 110.3. For rushing, he had 11 attempts for 107 yards and a touchdown, his longest run of the day being for 38 yards. Justice Hill, backup running back for the Ravens, had 6 attempts rushing for 60 yards. J.K. Dobbins had 7 attempts rushing for 23 yards in his return from injury. Mark Andrews had 8 receptions for 89 yards and 2 touchdowns. He had a hell of a day. Rashad Bateman had 2 receptions for 59 yards. Patrick Richard had 1 reception for 12 yards. The fullback, they tend to use him a lot in certain formations. Isaiah Likely, the rookie, didn't do much, only had 1 reception for 8 yards. Devin Duvernay had 2 receptions for 25 yards and a touchdown. Josh Oliver had 2 receptions for 8 yards and a touchdown. Mac Jones was 22 of 32 attempts for 321 yards, no touchdowns, and 3 interceptions, QBR rating of 62.1. Not a good day for Mac Jones, throwing 3 interceptions. had 321 yards, but 3 interceptions, being sacked 3 times, and also hurting his ankle didn't help him whatsoever. He couldn't even put any weight on it. He was screaming, and he was carried to the locker room. So Mac Jones is going to be out for some time, and that doesn't help the New England Patriots whatsoever. So they're moving forward with Brian Hoyer. And then today in week 4, the rookie QB Bailey Zappi came in and played against Green Bay. We'll talk about that in the next video. But certainly not good for New England, losing their franchise quarterback to an ankle injury. He also rushed for 5 attempts on 31 yards and had a touchdown. He did have a rushing touchdown, my bad. He did have a rushing touchdown. So he had 1 rushing touchdown and 3 interceptions. But still not a good day. 3 interceptions, obviously, for a quarterback. This is not a good day whatsoever. Ramondre Stevenson had 12 attempts rushing for 73 yards and a touchdown, 4 receptions for 28 yards. Damian Harris had 11 attempts rushing for 41 yards and 1 touchdown, had 2 receptions for 5 yards. Devontae Parker had a day for New England, though. Despite not getting a touchdown, 5 receptions for 156 yards. That's the Devontae Parker we used to see in Miami. So maybe he starts getting into his own rhythm, but who knows? With Joe Judge and Matt Patricia calling the offense, who knows? Kendrick Bourne had 4 receptions for 58 yards. Nelson Aguilar had 2 receptions for 41 yards, and Jonnu Smith had 4 receptions for 25 yards. Hunter Henry 1 reception for 8 yards. In the first quarter, Mark Andrews had a 5-yard touchdown pass from Lamar Jackson. Second quarter, Patriots, Nick Folk kicks a 35-yard field goal. Later on, Mac Jones has a 3-yard rushing touchdown. Then Mark Andrews has a 16-yard pass from Lamar Jackson for his second touchdown. Nick Folk later on kicks a 50-yard field goal. Damian Harris has a 2-yard rushing touchdown in the third quarter. Josh Oliver, 1-yard touchdown pass from Lamar Jackson. Later on, Devin Duvernay, 4-yard touchdown pass from Lamar Jackson. Justin Tucker with a 56-yard field goal. Fourth quarter, Ramondre Stevenson, 1-yard rushing touchdown. And then with 3 minutes remaining, the Ravens had another 9-yard touchdown pass from Lamar Jackson. Certainly had a hell of a day, though. So Ravens come out with the W. New England takes a loss. Moving on, Ravens 2-1, New England 1-2. Cincinnati playing the New York Jets. Now, coming to this game, Cincinnati was 0-2, so they were looking to get their first win of the season. And considering they were playing the New York Jets with Joe Flacco, that was pretty much a win for them already. Although the main concern was coming in, as always, is that offensive line with the Cincinnati Bengals. Considering that, despite the fact that they upgraded everything on that line, from left guard all the way down to right tackle, somehow they're still worse. Still doesn't make sense to me, but it is what it is. Joe Burrow had 23 completions on 36 attempts for 275 yards and 3 touchdowns, QBR rating of 114.9. Hell of a day for Joe Burrow, and that's the Joe Burrow that we are used to seeing, especially from last season. That's the Joe Burrow we're used to seeing, not what we've seen so far through the first 2 weeks. Joe Mixon had 12 attempts rushing for 24 yards. He also had 3 receptions for 14 yards. Samaje Perine had 9 attempts for 47 yards. I hope I said that name right. I've had a hard time pronouncing his name since he's been in the league. Tyler Boyd had 4 receptions for 105 yards and a touchdown. Hell of a day for Tyler Boyd. T. Higgins had 5 receptions for 93 yards, no touchdowns. Hell of a day for T. Higgins. Jamar Chase had 6 receptions for 29 yards and a touchdown. He was locked down by Sauce Gardner. Sauce Gardner, honestly, was the main corner coming out of that draft, and he's so far proved it. I mean, yes, Derek Stingley Jr. also came out of there, went to Houston, but Sauce Gardner, lockdown corner in college, and he's proving that already in the NFL. I mean, he locked down Jamar Chase. That's big. Like, that's huge for a rookie. That's fucking huge. Like, if you're able to hold down a top receiver, then you're keeping your end of the bargain. Like, no question. And certainly that's exactly what Sauce Gardner did. Now, Joe Flacco for the Jets had 28 completions of 52 attempts for 285 yards, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and he was sacked 4 times. Joe Burrow was sacked only 2 times, though, considering that concern coming in with the offensive line. He was only sacked 2 times, which is improvement for them. Joe Flacco, on the other hand, not a good day for him. Despite getting that win in Cleveland, he did not have a good day whatsoever. And with that being said, again, I'm going to say, why the fuck was he throwing the ball 52 times? I mean, that's a lot for Joe Flacco. And I mean, the dude's old. That's a lot. Throwing the ball over 60 times the week before and then throwing it 52 times when he hasn't been a starter in a minute, that's a lot for him. But, you know, he only did so much. He can only do so much, especially with how old he is now. Breece Hall had 8 attempts rushing for 39 yards. He also had 6 receptions for 53 yards. Michael Carter had 11 attempts rushing for 39 yards and 1 reception for 7 yards. Tyler Conklin had 8 receptions for 84 yards. He's been a nice addition for the Jets. Tyler Conklin coming over from the Minnesota Vikings. He has been a really nice addition for them. Certainly has been a threat in the passing game. And the Jets haven't had a consistent tight end in a few years now, so that's good for them to see. Like I said, I really like what the Jets did in the offseason. I definitely think they are getting better as a team. It's only going to go as far as Zach Wilson takes them, though. However far Zach Wilson goes is how far the Jets will go. But the Jets certainly are making improvements with Robert Saleh at the helm. Garrett Wilson, the rookie, had 6 receptions for 60 yards. Elijah Moore had 4 receptions for 49 yards. Corey Davis had 2 receptions for 27 yards. And C.J. Uzomah, the backup tight end, former Cincinnati Bengal, in his return to Cincinnati, only had 1 reception for 5 yards. Eesh. Now, why you leave Joe Burrow for Joe Flacco or Zach Wilson, that's beyond me. But, the money talks at the end of the day, and it is what it is. But the Bengals get the win. Jets, they're getting Zach Wilson back for the Steelers game, which is exactly what happened, and the Jets ended up getting the win. We'll talk about that next week as well. So they definitely already look better with Zach Wilson, but like I said, Zach Wilson only will take them as far as they go. Now, P. Ryan, the backup running back, had a 12-yard pass from Joe Burrow in the first quarter. Greg Zuerlein had a 50-yard field goal followed by a 40-yard field goal in the first quarter with 0 seconds remaining on the clock in the first quarter. Tyler Boyd had a 56-yard touchdown pass from Joe Burrow. In the second quarter, Evan McPherson had a 22-yard field goal, followed by a 43-yard field goal. With 0 seconds remaining in the second quarter, Greg Zuerlein had a 52-yard field goal. Third quarter, Jamar Chase had a 5-yard touchdown pass from Joe Burrow, and Greg Zuerlein at the end of the third quarter had a 43-yard field goal, and then nobody scored in the fourth quarter. Kind of a quiet game, but it was definitely a nice bounce back for Cincinnati after awful 0-2 start, and that's exactly what they needed, considering too they were about to face the Dolphins going into Thursday night, so they had a short week, so that was a good win for them for sure. Raiders at Titans. Now, if you would have went into this matchup and said both teams were 0-2, I mean, people would have probably laughed at you, considering the fact that the Raiders acquired Devontae Adams, Josh McDaniels comes in, and the Tennessee Titans, being the number 1 seed in the AFC, nobody expected them to, I don't think, go 0-2 right away. Maybe you could say 1-1, but 0-2, I don't think anyone saw that coming, considering how we've talked about the AFC arms race coming into this year and how loaded and just stacked the AFC is. I don't think anybody expected that. So Derek Carr had 26 of 44 attempts for 303 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. He was sacked once. Now, Mac Hollins came out of nowhere for the Raiders more towards the fourth quarter. He had 8 receptions for 158 yards and 1 touchdown, longest reception of the day being for 60 yards. Came out of nowhere, so Mac Hollins is a name we're certainly going to watch moving forward because he had a hell of a day against that Tennessee Titans defense despite losing. Now, given he is playing that Tennessee Titans secondary, with the exception of Kevin Byard, but that's a hell of a day for a no-name receiver coming out of nowhere. So good for him, honestly. It's nice to see guys emerge all the time, because you hear the same old faces, or you hear the same old names, and sometimes it gets boring, I'm not going to lie. Josh Jacobs had 13 attempts rushing for 66 yards. He also had 5 receptions for 31 yards. Brandon Bolden had 2 receptions for 4 yards. He ran the ball 3 times for 17 yards. Foster Moreau had 3 receptions for 44 yards, the tight end. Darren Waller had 3 receptions for 22 yards. Keelan Cole had 1 reception for 12 yards, and Devontae Adams had 5 receptions for 36 yards and 1 touchdown. Now, why Derek Carr is not throwing Devontae Adams the ball, I'm not sure. He threw it a lot to Mac Hollins, that's for sure, who had 8 receptions, like we said. But I'm not sure why Derek Carr hasn't been throwing Devontae Adams the ball. That's something that's also going to be monitored going forward. Ryan Tannehill had 19 completions of 27 attempts for 264 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, was sacked once. QBR was 98.4. Also, Derek Carr's QBR was 85.7. Not to mention, Mac Hollins did throw the ball once for 4 yards. But regardless, Tannehill had a better day after having a brutal day in Buffalo. Derrick Henry looked like himself again, 20 attempts on 85 yards for 1 touchdown, given he would have more rushing yards, but he's starting to look like himself again. And the way he played in Indy, I think Derrick Henry's starting to get going again, so certainly something to watch going forward. Dontrell Hilliard had 2 attempts rushing for 14 yards, 1 reception for 30 yards. Derrick Henry also had 5 receptions for 58 yards. Treylon Burks, the rookie, had 1 reception for 13 yards. Robert Woods, former Buffalo Bill and Los Angeles Ram, had 4 receptions for 85 yards. Finally starting to get him going after just using him as a run blocker, which is just stupid, considering he's probably arguably your best receiver on the field, unless you believe in Treylon Burks, of course. Nick Westbrook-Akine, hope I said that name right, had 3 receptions for 40 yards. Austin Hooper had 2 receptions for 19 yards. And then the backup tight end, Jeff Swain, had 3 receptions for 19 yards and a touchdown. In the first quarter, Jeff Swain had that 2-yard touchdown pass from Ryan Tannehill, followed by a Daniel Carlson Raiders 21-yard field goal in the first quarter. Second quarter, Derrick Henry had a 1-yard rushing touchdown, followed by a Raiders Devontae Adams 5-yard touchdown pass. Then Ryan Tannehill rushed the ball for 1 yard for a touchdown. Randy Bullock had 48-yard field goal. Daniel Carlson had a 32-yard field goal in the third quarter. Then in the fourth quarter, Daniel Carlson had a 35-yard field goal. Matt Collins had a 9-yard touchdown pass from Derek Carr. I mean, the Raiders had a chance to win this game to right down to the wire, and they just couldn't get the job done. So Tennessee comes out with the win, and the Raiders fall to 0-3. And of course, before the Denver game, the Raiders did end up getting a win, but we'll talk about that next week. Or we'll talk about that in the next video. Up to this point, in 25 games coaching, Josh McDaniels was 5-20. Not good. Not good whatsoever. He had a horrible stint with Denver Broncos, if you remember. He had a horrible tenure there, so that kind of accumulates to that record for Josh McDaniels in the Las Vegas Raiders, that's for sure. And moving on to the next game. This was an upset. Jacksonville beats the living shit out of the LA Chargers 38-10. The Chargers are going to Charger, and it seems to happen all the time. I don't know why. Every year, every single year we go into the season, we say the Chargers are going to win the division, or we say the Chargers are going to have a really good year, and then they lose to Jacksonville, or they just choke in general, and then they don't get in the playoffs. I don't fucking get it. I don't know why this happens with this Chargers team. It happens all the time. It's happened since Phillip Rivers has been there. I mean, I'm pretty sure it happened even when Drew Brees was there back in the day. I mean, this team always chokes. I don't get it. I don't get it. It's probably karma for Dean Spanos being a piece of shit, but I really just don't know why they choke. I don't know why they do this to themselves. They have the personnel, they have the talent, and I thought Brandon Staley wasn't a bad head coach, but now I'm starting to scratch my head at this. But I mean, what the fuck? So Justin Herbert had 25 completions out of 45 attempts for 297 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, and he was sacked once. Sony Michel had 5 attempts rushing for 22 yards. Austin Eckler had 4 attempts rushing for 5 yards. Josh Palmer had 6 receptions for 99 yards. Austin Eckler also had 8 receptions for 48 yards. Jalen Guyton had 2 receptions for 64 yards. Gerald Everett had 2 receptions for 25 yards. Mike Williams had 1 reception for 15 yards and a touchdown. DeAndre Carter had 3 receptions for 31 yards. I mean, just the offense, nothing was going. For the offense, nothing got going. I mean, the offense stalled. Just nothing went right for this Chargers team. Nothing went right for them. I don't know if they just didn't prepare enough for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm really not sure, but this kind of reminds me of the game last year between the Bills and Jaguars. I don't know exactly what happened, but they didn't look like the team that almost beat Kansas City last week. They didn't look like themselves. I'm not sure exactly what went wrong here, but on the other side for the Jaguars, Trevor Lawrence was 28 of 39 for 262 yards and 3 touchdowns. His QBR was 115.5. Probably had the best day of his career by far so far. Also, Justin Herbert's QBR was 74. My bad. James Robinson had a day on the ground. 17 attempts for 100 yards and a touchdown. Longest run of the day being for 50 yards. Travis Etienne had 13 attempts for 45 yards. Zay Jones, former Buffalo Bill, starting to come into his own with the Jacksonville Jaguars, had 10 receptions for 85 yards and a touchdown. Christian Kirk had 6 receptions for 72 yards and a touchdown. Marvin Jones had 4 receptions for 33 yards and a touchdown. Jamal Agnew, 1 reception for 17 yards. Evan Ingram, 1 reception for 9 yards. Hell of a day for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And with this, they moved to 2-1, and certainly an improvement with Doug Peterson over Urban Meyer. And honestly, I think Doug Peterson has been a really good fit for Trevor Lawrence so far, because I think we're seeing what we were supposed to see out of Trevor Lawrence last year, and I certainly think that you can only have as bad as a rookie year as anybody normally, but I mean, Trevor Lawrence had probably one of the worst rookie years I think we've ever seen for a quarterback, considering just all the fucking bullshit they went through with Urban Meyer. So I definitely think that Doug Peterson is helping this team take a step in the right direction, and we all were wondering what the hell, the Jaguars were doing in the offseason, throwing money at Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, Evan Ingram, but so far, it's working. And we all were wondering why the hell did you draft Travis Etienne when you already had James Robinson, but they look like a solid 1-2 punch, and not to mention Etienne's really good catching passes out of the backfield. Like we said, 3 receptions for 30 yards. James Robinson had 3 receptions for 16 yards. So, it's a 1-2 punch, and Christian Kirk looks really good right now. Zay Jones finally coming into his own as a receiver, and, Evan Ingram doesn't look as terrible as he did with the Giants, so maybe he just needed to get out of there. But hey, so far so good for Jacksonville. And Doug Peterson really isn't a bad head coach. He did win a Super Bowl for Philly. I just think he was in a tough situation, and I think he went about it wrong by, tanking on live television and fucking, just moving Carson Wentz and Jalen Hurts in and out of the lineup, and that's just a mess. You're just fucking shooting yourself in the foot when you're doing a quarterback carousel like that, putting a quarterback in and out, kind of like with the Bucs back in 2018 when it was Jameis and Ryan Fitzpatrick and Jameis and Ryan Fitzpatrick and Jameis and Ryan Fitzpatrick, or maybe it was 2017. But the one year the Bucs had both quarterbacks and they just kept switching both the quarterbacks. It's a recipe for disaster when you're constantly switching quarterbacks every week. It just never ends well. Moving on, Seattle and Atlanta. Atlanta travels to Seattle, and honestly, this was back and forth until about the fourth quarter, and I don't think anybody was expecting this, considering these two teams were considered probably the worst 2 teams coming into this year. And honestly, so far, Seattle and Atlanta have honestly exceeded expectations, because Atlanta looked like they were going to be the worst team in football, and they've been staying in games. And Seattle, losing Russell Wilson and moving on to Geno Smith, they don't look as good, but they don't look awful so far. And not to mention, Seattle had 41 points today, which we'll talk about in the next video. So it's just Seattle doesn't look as bad as we thought they look either. So that's just kind of a shocker. But both these teams were back and forth until the fourth quarter, where it was uneventful. But hey, good football is good football at the end of the day, honestly, considering these 2 teams aren't nearly as good and they were able to have a competitive game. I'll take that. I'll take that for the sport all day. So Marcus Mariota had 13 completions for 20 attempts on 229 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. He was sacked 3 times. QBR of 99.8. Cordero Patterson had 17 attempts rushing for 141 yards and a touchdown. Hell of a day for him. 1 reception for 12 yards. He is that Swiss Army knife. Cordero Patterson runs the ball. He'll go to the slot. He'll go to the outside. He's all over the place. He's literally their Swiss Army knife. Tyler Algier had 6 attempts rushing for 25 yards. I believe he's a rookie. I've never heard of him before, so excuse me if I pronounce that wrong. He had 1 reception for 5 yards. Kyle Pitts had 5 receptions for 87 yards. Drake London had 3 receptions for 54 yards and a touchdown. And other than that, there were a couple other no-name receivers who had a couple of receptions, but Atlanta didn't look terrible. They haven't looked terrible. They haven't looked good or great, but they haven't looked terrible. I mean, they're mid. I don't want to just sit here and say like, oh, they're nah, and be lazy, but like so far they're not like shitting the bed like we said they would. I mean, that could only be a matter of time, but they're not shitting the bed. That's my point. So, I mean, hey, do what you got to do, Arthur Smith. I mean, obviously, if you don't, you might lose your job. So, I don't blame him for, doing the best he can with the players he has. It's his job. So, Geno Smith had 32 completions of 44 attempts for 325 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, QBR rating of 99.1. He was sacked twice. Not a bad day at all for Geno Smith. A good day for Geno Smith. He had a chance at the end to win them the game. He had a chance at the end to win them that game, but that interception cost him. And as unfortunate as it is, that's how it is in this league. But Geno Smith, he's come a long way since those days in New York. That's for sure. He's come a long fucking way since those days with the Jets. I remember in 2014 when the Jets were playing the Bills, and Geno Smith played like 10 minutes of ball before he got benched for Michael Vick. I mean, he's come a long way since then. He's come a long fucking way. So, credit to Geno, honestly. Despite not getting the win, hell of a day for him. Rashad Penny had 14 attempts rushing for 66 yards. He looks like he's finally starting to come into his own. For a while, everyone kind of wrote him off as a bust, including myself, but Rashad Penny, I think, has started to come into his own. Seattle's losing Chris Carson to a neck injury, which ended up being career-ending. Seeing Rashad Penny come into his own, that certainly helped them a lot in the long run. And it should certainly help them in the long run as well, because he is starting to finally look like he's coming into his own, and like, hey, this is the guy we drafted in the first round, so like, starting to see some fucking return on that high investment. DJ Dallas had 3 attempts rushing for 21 yards. Kenneth Walker III had 3 attempts rushing for 19 yards. DJ Dallas had 2 receptions for 17 yards. Walker III had 3 receptions for 14 yards. Tyler Lockett had 9 receptions for 76 yards. And DK Metcalf had 5 receptions for 64 yards and a touchdown. Colby Parkinson had 2 receptions for 44 yards. Will Disley had 3 receptions for 34 yards. Marquise Goodwin had 2 receptions for 31 yards. Noah Fant had 4 receptions for 27 yards, and Penny Hart had 1 reception for 15 yards. In the first quarter, Jason Myers had a 32-yard field goal. Later on, Marcus Mariota 1-yard rushing touchdown, followed by a Will Disley Seattle 18-yard touchdown pass from Geno Smith. Younghoe Koo had a 41-yard field goal for the Falcons with 7 seconds left in the first quarter. In the second quarter, Cordell Patterson had a 17-yard rushing touchdown. DK Metcalf had an 18-yard touchdown pass from Geno Smith by the Seahawks. Jason Myers had a 31-yard field goal with 5 seconds remaining in the second quarter. Third quarter, 10 minutes to go, Younghoe Koo 54-yard field goal, followed by a Seattle Jason Myers 25-yard field goal with 3 minutes and 11 seconds, then followed with 35 seconds left in the third quarter. Drake London had a 14-yard touchdown pass. Like I said, Geno Smith had a chance for them to win the game, but there was an interception right towards the end there, and that honestly cost them the game because they were driving down the field, and they just couldn't get it done. That pass was intended for Tyler Lockett, but it was intercepted by Richie Grant. Had a minute 30 seconds remaining, and that was pretty much the ball game from there. Patterson ran it twice, and on those 2 attempts, he had 5 yards each. Led to a first down. Marcus Mariota kneels. That's the ball game. So unfortunately, for Geno, we can't get the win, but it's always next week, and we'll talk about that next week, obviously. There's always the next one. We'll talk about that next week, obviously, as Seattle did get the win. So Tampa Bay plays Green Bay. Rodgers versus Brady. Big time matchup. Big expectations. That did not live up to it at all. Green Bay got the win 14-12. Very boring game. I watched it. I didn't watch it long. It got really boring really fast. I'm just going to go on a limb and say that Tom Brady doesn't look good at all this year. I don't know how people are going to feel with me about that. I know it's early in the year. Tom Brady does not look good. In fact, you can see in his face, he doesn't look good at all, like, period. Like, he's been dealing with shit with his wife, Giselle, and he's taking care of the kids more, and he literally is like, I'm 45, man. I got a lot of shit going on, so I think life's starting to catch up with Tom Brady, honestly. I mean, he's been playing this game for a long fucking time, and, you know, I normally don't like to sit here and say it. I mean, this could be his last year. This really could be. Although I'll believe it when I see it, because we all thought that he retired and then he didn't. So we'll just, you know, I'll believe it when I see it. But I'm going to go on a limb and say he doesn't look good this year, and this could be it, man. I mean, I was watching him tonight against Kansas City, and he looks like a fucking old man out there. Like, he just doesn't... He doesn't look good, man. He really just doesn't. So, Brady, for Tampa Bay, did have 31 completions of 42 attempts for 271 yards and a touchdown. QBR rating of 98.4. And, like, that's not a bad stat line. Like, that's not a bad stat line. But I'm saying, like, just watching Brady, he doesn't look good, man. He really just doesn't. I'm just being honest. Maybe that's just me. That stat line isn't horrible, but for Tom Brady, it's not that great. You know, you look at that, you're like, whoa, what did Brady do wrong that day? Normally, Brady's thrown for way more than 271 yards. It's not a bad stat line, though, by any means. I'm just saying, watching Brady, he just doesn't look right. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. He just really doesn't look right. Leonard Fournette had 12 attempts for 35 yards rushing. He also had 5 receptions for 35 yards. Russell Gage had 12 receptions for 87 yards and a touchdown. Cameron Brate had 5 receptions for 52 yards. Rashad Perryman had 3 receptions for 44 yards. Jalen Darden had 1 reception for 25 yards. Kyle Rudolph had 1 reception for 12 yards. Yes, Kyle Rudolph is still playing in the league. He's in Tampa Bay, if you didn't know that. Cole Beasley had his debut with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Yes, Cole Beasley is a Buccaneer. Signed from the practice squad, got elevated before the game. He had 3 receptions for 12 yards. He did get yelled at by Brady. Was watching it during the game. He threw a pass to Beasley down the middle, and he looked at him after that reception, and he was like, what the fuck was that? So I don't know. Not a good start for Cole Beasley with Tom Brady. Scotty Miller had 1 reception for 4 yards. I think, honestly, you know, the Bucs are just trying to get every receiver they can for Brady. I mean, they have a lot of guys. Although Julio was out for this game, Mike Evans was suspended for a game, and Chris Godwin was out for a game. Like I said, that's a good stat line for Brady, not having his main guys. I'm just saying, watching him, though, in general, not just from this game, but just watching him from week 1 to now, he does not look good, man. He really doesn't. Maybe that's just me. Maybe that's a freezing cold take by me, but he just doesn't look good, man. On the other side, Aaron Rodgers had 27 completions out of 35 attempts for 255 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. QBR rating of 103.9. He was sacked once. Aaron Jones had 12 attempts rushing for 36 yards. He had 3 receptions for 11 yards as well. A.J. Dillon had 12 attempts rushing for 32 yards. He had 2 receptions for 6 yards. Romeo Doubs, the rookie, had a day. 8 receptions for 73 yards and a touchdown. Longest reception of the day being for 21 yards. Randall Cobb had 2 receptions for 57 yards. Alan Lazard had 4 receptions for 45 yards and a touchdown. Robert Tonyan had 6 receptions for 37 yards. Tyler Davis had 2 receptions for 26 yards. Looking at the scoring, like I said, it was pretty uneventful. Ryan Suckup had a 45-yard field goal in the first quarter, followed by a Romeo Doubs 5-yard touchdown pass from Aaron Rodgers. And in the second quarter, Alan Lazard has a 60-yard touchdown pass from Aaron Rodgers. Third quarter, Ryan Suckup 45-yard field goal. Fourth quarter with 14 seconds left, Russell Gage gets a 1-yard touchdown pass from Tom Brady. and 14-12 ball game. They went for 2 points, didn't go through. I mean, that was pretty much it. So they would have got that 2-point conversion. That would have helped them. And they would have tied the game. They could have went overtime, but clock hits 0, that's the ball games. And that's what we learned in Buffalo, Miami. So you don't learn it the easy way, you learn it the hard way. And that's what happened. So the Washington Commies played the Philadelphia Eagles. And the Eagles, like I said, I believe the Eagles honestly are the best team in the NFC right now. I mean, there is just no stopping this team. There really isn't, because if they're not going to get you on offense, they're going to get you on defense. And Carson Wentz playing his former team in the Eagles, what a fucking hell of a welcome back, right? Carson Wentz was sacked 9 fucking times. 9 times. 9 fucking times this guy was sacked. Unreal. Offensive line for the Commanders. Non-existent. I'm surprised Carson Wentz didn't get hurt. I mean, he got sacked 9 fucking times. That's not good. Wentz was 25 of 43 attempts for 211 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. He had 3 attempts rushing for 22 yards. It's clearly he had no time to, throw, so he had to run a couple times. He can still somewhat run with his legs. Not as, probably not as good as he used to, but he can still run when he has to. He's not a dual threat quarterback, but Carson Wentz, like Tannehill, he can run when he has to. Antonio Gibson had 12 attempts rushing for 38 yards and a touchdown. Curtis Samuel had 7 receptions for 48 yards. He had 3 attempts rushing for 13 yards. J.G. McKissick, he had 6 receptions for 32 yards, 3 attempts for 8 yards. Jonathan Williams had 1 attempt for 6 yards. Terry McLaurin had 6 receptions for 102 yards. Still had a good day. Still effective when he needs to be, just not enough to get the job done, especially when your quarterback gets sacked 9 fucking times. Jahan Dotson, the rookie, had 2 receptions for 10 yards. Logan Thomas had 2 receptions for 5 yards. Brandon Graham for the Eagles had a day. He had 2.5 sacks, 5 quarterback hits, and he had 6 combined tackles. Hassan Reddick had 1.5 sacks, 2 quarterback hits, 4 combined tackles. Fletcher Cox had 1.5 sacks, 3 combined tackles, 2 QB hits. Josh Sweat had 1.5 sacks, 3 combined tackles, 3 quarterback hits. TJ Edwards had 1 sack, 10 combined tackles, 2 quarterback hits. Javon Hargrave, 1 sack, 2 combined tackles, 1 quarterback hit, and a fumble recovery. Not to mention Patrick Johnson had 2 quarterback hits, and Britton Covey had a fumble recovery. Not a good day at all for Carson Wentz. Nothing went right for the Commanders, and they're just not able to match up against this Eagles fucking juggernaut that they have on this team. Jake Elliott in the second quarter had a 32-yard field goal. Dallas Goedert had a 23-yard touchdown pass from Jalen Hurts. A.J. Brown had a 9-yard touchdown pass from Jalen Hurts. Devonta Smith had a 2-yard touchdown pass from Jalen Hurts, all in the second quarter. And then the fourth quarter, the Commanders had a safety, and then Antonio Gibson had a 1-yard touchdown pass. Everything for the Eagles really happened in the second quarter, but regardless of that, Jalen Hurts was still 22 of 35 completions for 340 yards and 3 touchdowns. QBR of 123.5. And all that was in the second quarter. He had 9 attempts rushing for 20 yards. Miles Sanders had 15 attempts for 46 yards. Keenan Gainwell had 3 attempts rushing for 6 yards. Devonta Smith, 8 receptions, 169 yards, 1 touchdown. And I thought Devonta Smith was the best receiver coming out of that draft back in 2021. And a lot of people wouldn't draft him because he was considered to be small or like frail, like too skinny. And it's like, I understand like size is important, because you look at guys like DK Metcalf and his now teammate AJ Brown, like they're physical guys, they're huge. But like Devonta Smith as a receiver in college He won the Heisman Trophy. I'm sorry, if a receiver wins the Heisman Trophy, like, that's the real fucking deal. Because normally it just goes to the quarterbacks. Occasionally go to a defensive lineman, or maybe another defender if lucky. But a receiver? Like, come on. He won the fucking Heisman as receiver, and you're like, oh, I'm not gonna draft him because he's skinny. Like, shut the fuck up. What you want to draft a receiver that's fat? Like, come on. Do fucking better. You know, some of these scouts say they're professionals, and then they're like, I'm not gonna draft him because he's skinny. Like, shut the fuck up. Moving on. A.J. Brown had 5 receptions for 85 yards and a touchdown. Dallas Goedert had 3 receptions for 26 yards. Grant Caltera, I don't know if I said that name right at all. I've never heard of the guy. 1 reception for 40 yards. Zach Pascal, former Colt, had 3 receptions for 18 yards. But regardless, Eagles got a good NFC East win, and they only had to do in the second quarter, really. You can sit here and say, well, why did they do in the first, third, or fourth quarter? I mean, it didn't really matter. They did all in the second quarter. Washington could get nothing going. They sacked Carson Wentz 9 times. If your quarterback gets sacked 9 times, it might as well be the ball game. I mean, come on. 9 times? That's inexcusable for that offensive line. Inexcusable. And then finally, Dallas at the Giants. Cooper Rush wins in this game, and he won today. Obviously, we'll talk about that next video. I know I keep reiterating it. I just don't want people to get confused. Since I'm talking about week 3 when week 4 just happened, we still have to talk about week 4. But Cooper Rush is playing good for the Dallas Cowboys at a fraction of the price that Dak Prescott's getting paid. So my question is there a possibility that if Cooper Rush keeps playing good, are they just going to stick with Cooper Rush? Or are they going to bring Dak Prescott back? Because when people were talking about that, I was like, no, they're going to keep Dak. But, like, realistically, though, if Cooper Rush keeps winning them games at the fraction of the price that Dak Prescott's getting paid, are they going to move on from Dak Prescott? Because Ezekiel Elliott is in the final fully guaranteed year of his contract that they've been eating up since 2019 now. Or maybe it was 2018. But they've been eating it up for a minute now. That's the point. So my question is, if they're going to move on from Zeke, do they move on from Dak too and just start fresh with Cooper Rush and Tony Pollard? I don't know, man. It's just something to think about. But regardless, Cooper Rush had 21 completions of 31 attempts for 215 yards and a touchdown, QBR of 98.2. Tony Pollard had 13 attempts rushing for 105 yards. Ezekiel Elliott had 15 attempts rushing for 73 yards and a touchdown. CeeDee Lamb had 8 receptions for 87 yards and a touchdown. Clutch when I needed him in my fantasy team, just saying. He got me the win. Down to the wire, got me the win. Noah Brown had 5 receptions for 54 yards. Peyton Hendershot. Okay, I'm just making sure that's right. Yeah. Peyton Hendershot. Yeah, that's his name. Peyton Hendershot had 3 receptions for 43 yards. That's a hell of a last name. Jake Ferguson had 2 receptions for 13 yards. Jalen Tolbert, the rookie, had 1 reception for 4 yards in his debut. Not much there for him on that debut, but he's also buried on the depth chart. Daniel Jones had 20 completions out of 37 attempts for 196 yards, no touchdowns, and an interception, QBR of 57.9. He ran the ball 9 times on his own for 79 yards. Saquon Barkley had 14 attempts for 81 yards and a touchdown. Richie James had 1 attempt rushing for 4 yards. Matt Breida had 1 attempt rushing for 3 yards. Saquon Barkley had 4 receptions for 45 yards. Richie James had 4 receptions for 36 yards. Sterling Shepard had 5 receptions for 49 yards. He got hurt in this game, and he's out for the year. David Sills had 2 receptions for 20 yards. Daniel Bellinger had 4 receptions for 40 yards. I hope I said that last name right. Kenny Galladay, no receptions, nothing. The Giants depth chart on the receiver, for the Giants wide receiver depth chart is kind of weird because it's honestly flip-flopped. With the exception of Sterling Shepard, they're not playing Darius Slayton. Kenny Galladay's not playing. They're playing David Sills. They're playing Richie James. They're throwing to Saquon Barkley out of the backfield. So Dayball's trying to find his guys. He honestly wants nothing to do with what David Gettleman gave him before he retired. So you can clearly see with the new regime coming in for Dayball and Joe Shane, they want nothing to do with David Gettleman's guys. And it's kind of funny to see, honestly. And considering that they're doing that, kind of surprising that they're 2-1 here and not, 0-3. But regardless, in the first quarter, nothing really happened. Brett Meyer hit a 26-yard field goal for Dallas. Second quarter, Graham Ganu had a 42-yard field goal for the Giants, followed by a Cowboys 28-yard field goal from Brett Meyer, followed by another Graham Gano Giants 51-yard field goal. Saquon Barkley in the third quarter had a 36-yard rushing touchdown, followed by a Zeke Elliott rushing touchdown with 27 seconds remaining in the third quarter. In the fourth quarter, with 8:37 remaining, CeeDee Lamb had a 1-yard touchdown pass from Cooper Rush. With 5:58 remaining, they had another 44-yard field goal from Brett Meyer. And then with 3:37 remaining, the Giants had a 51-yard field goal from Graham Gano. So, Cowboys get the win in the NFC East to keep their season alive. And honestly, it's crazy with Cooper Rush, with this storyline coming out that he just keeps winning games with them when he's playing good football, because considering how ugly the Cowboys looked week 1 against the Buccaneers and Dak Prescott getting hurt, you're like, here we go again. That's the season. And honestly, it's not. Like I said, they're playing better ball with Cooper Rush and Tony Pollard than they are with Zeke and Dak. Cooper Rush and Tony Pollard, you could put their salaries combined, and Zeke Elliott's going to make more than them. Or honestly, Dak Prescott, if you really wanted to, go there. I mean, obviously, because, Prescott's been the franchise quarterback since 2016. But, I mean, if you could get the same, if not better results for the fraction of the price, wouldn't you think you would rather move forward with those guys? Not to mention Pollard's younger and he has fresh legs. And, Cooper Rush, I mean, Jerry said he'd welcome a quarterback controversy, so maybe Jerry moves forward with Cooper Rush in the future. Who knows? I'm just saying anything's possible. Because one minute Jerry loves a player, and the next minute he wants to get rid of him. That's what happened with Amari Cooper. The minute he got Amari Cooper, he was in love with him. And then this past offseason, he wanted nothing to do with Amari Cooper, and he used him as a scapegoat, and he traded him to Cleveland. So who knows? I don't know, man. I'm just saying anything's possible. But that's going to wrap up the Week 3 Roundtable. I just hope no one really gets confused, because I know Week 4 just happened. But we're getting this out now. This was kind of overdue a little bit because I was so focused on the Bills-Dolphins game that I just kind of forgot about all the other games, and I was too pissed off to really care. But this is just kind of a summary of going over it. These aren't perfect. I'm not going to sit here and say they're perfect. They're not, because I don't get to watch all the games. I get to watch a majority of them like I did in Week 1, but I don't get to watch all of them. So regardless, though, this is the Week 3 Roundtable. We talked about the Bills already. Going to talk about Week 4 next. We're going to talk about the Bills-Ravens game. We got the Sabres season opener coming this Thursday. And then hopefully we're going to get that part 2 out. And a lot's coming, so hopefully you stay tuned for that. And hopefully you reach this long into the video with me. So as always, like, comment, subscribe. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. Go Bills, go Sabres.